Hello and welcome to the Dr. Lake Show. This is Dr. Paola Lake. Really happy to be here today. Beautiful day here in British Columbia, Nanaimo. And I am here again with my assistant and co-producer, Dylan Soriano-Powling. Hello, Dylan.
Hello, Paula.
Nice to have you once again.
Yeah, it's good to be here. And we have a guest today.
We do have a guest today. And actually, this is, for me, a special guest. This is someone I've known for a number of years and worked with, and who has been, in some respects, a mentor to me in as I started out and launched off in my private practice. So I've been very grateful. He's been a wonderful support throughout the years. He's also a very experienced clinical psychologist, currently retired, over 40 years, or just under 40 years experience, I believe. Started in Ontario, BC, working as a psychologist, and then has specialized in a variety of areas through the course of his career, a wealth of knowledge and lots of experience. And so I'm really happy to have you here, Larry. Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome. Nice to be here.
Well, we've had some fun over the years, right, as you've been doing your work, and you've had lots of different experience. And one of the things I always loved about you was your concept of reinventing yourself, and so through your career has really reflected that, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm someone who gets bored pretty easily. So just doing straight clinical practice the way I started out many, many years ago, it was all right for a while, but then I wanted more variety, I wanted more challenges, I wanted more opportunities to learn in different areas. And so I started branching out from individual and family therapy to custody and access assessments, which we can get into another time, looking at different populations that I could serve, such as people with high trauma symptoms, all of which provided learning opportunities for me and an opportunity to expand my practice and get into different things and keep me interested.
And you even did some of your own other ventures. You went into real estate, you explored other dimensions. So you really practiced a lot of the work that you did. Was you really made the best effort to model all that you were teaching, really?
I tried to. I've even, in my past, made a couple of videos, one of which I helped co-write. So yeah, I tried to use my skills in different ways, and some ways were educational, trying to educate public about different things. Some were, as I say, applied primarily to my clinical practice. But I was always interested in learning more, and as you know, towards the end of my practice, I was developing new clinical procedures for dealing with trauma, which were very effective, some of which I've taught to other people. And I tried also to be there to help other psychologists who were building their own practices and used to receive phone calls over the years. How do I do this? How do I expand? What do I do about this?
And so am I one of those people?
We've had some conversations, some interesting challenges.
Yes. Well, one of the things I've always talked about, even in my radio or doing show, is, we got to find mentors and find people that have something that, that they can share with you. And that's how we grow, right? We grow through meeting with people such as yourself, who has a lot of experience and guidance. And you have always an inspirational message I've always appreciated.
Well, I think, too, it's generally recognized that if you want to learn something new, having a mentor is one of the fastest and most efficient way of doing that.
Yes.
Because that way you don't have to go and do all the research and try and incorporate what it's all about and make sense of it all. You've got someone you can actually talk to.
Yes.
And those interactions are, I think, extremely useful.
Yes.
Very valuable in helping people learn.
Yeah, and I think that you've certainly been one of those too many people, that my sense in your work. And we have a number of topics that we had talked about maybe coming up with, because I think we could probably talk for a number of hours on different topics. But we picked one in particular. I think it's kind of relevant to COVID because of all the changes that have been happening. And it's also a good follow-up to to my previous show, which was really about loneliness, and it's irrelevant to that. One of the things what we're talking about today is about relationships and the meeting and the looking for the partner that would be considered suitable to you, and perhaps even how to choose and select and screen the partners that you are looking for, and some of the challenges people have. And this is something you and I have talked about. And one of the things I remember in my private practice, and you might have experienced that too, Larry, just how many people experience loneliness and struggles in finding that partner, and how important this topic is. You were talking recently about the importance of relationships. Wondering if you could talk a little more from that. What would you express with me about why do relationships? What relevance are they to our well-being?
Well, I think to really understand that, Paula, we have to go back to sort of the beginning of when we started to really look at relationships and what was important, and what were the differences between what we would like to have and what do we actually need in relationships. And for that, I go back to experiments that were done in the 40s and 50s and even into the 60s, which would never be allowed today, by the way, because they were simply too cruel on the participants, because the participants in these cases were, to begin with, young rhesus monkeys, which Harlow used, and then later people used actual infant children, orphan children. And one very famous experiment, which I know you know about, was an experiment in which they took, I think it was 20 children, and they provided them with the bare necessities of life. In other words, they were fed, they were changed, they were provided warmth and a bed, but basically no more human contact than was absolutely necessary to provide those basic necessities. And they compared those children with another 20 children who were cuddled and rocked a certain amount of time each day, and they were looking for what happened. And it's a whole range of experiments that are fascinating. They had to stop that experiment because the children who were not receiving any touching, the cuddling and the rocking, started to die.
Yeah.
So that was a very clear indication that in human relationships, contact, whether it's touching or emotional, is very important for our emotional well-being. And I think that we see that today with COVID-19, and particularly in the long-term care homes. The biggest complaint we hear being reported from the families and from the people in the care home is we're not getting any contact. It's all very well to talk. We can do it by Zoom, we can do it by phone, we can do it behind plexiglass windows, but we're missing the contact.
Yeah.
And some people have even gone so far as to say, fine, we're keeping our elderly safe, but for what purpose? They're depressed, they're unhappy, they're suicidal, because they're missing that human contact that, my belief, is so very, very valuable.
So this is one of the biggest challenges in this time. And so, and you know, we've and part of my discussion from the last show was that people feel that isolation on even a physical level, that this it's that feeling of something lacking that is a need, and how it impacts our survival, really. So this is, for me, a really relevant topic. The issue that I see, especially during COVID, is that how is and not even before COVID, and you might hear some scratching in the background. That is my lovely dog, who's entertaining herself as we are doing a show. So just think of it as white noise in the background. But so choosing a partner, and there's issues that I see, and you've likely seen over the years around choosing a partner, that people tend to have patterns. Do you hear that noise?
I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Let me just see if I can get Stella. So the name of my dog is Stella, and she's a major sweetheart. You might end up seeing her on Instagram. I have a few pictures of her, and she's contact. She's She's my partner in crime here as I'm doing this show. So there she goes. You see, I just had to bring her up for a minute. So is the issues around finding partners that are suitable. And there are things that we've talked about that we see as patterns of what people tend to do when they're looking for a partner. And I'm wondering if you could bring up some of those topics we've brought up.
Okay, well, let's go back first of all to what's the basis of a relationship. And in my opinion, one of the biggest bases is support. And choosing a partner, whether it's a friend, whether it's an intimate partner, whatever, where you get the kind of support that you need and you give back the support that they need. And for this, we're talking about healthy relationships, not dysfunctional relationships. That's a whole other topic that we could talk about.
That's a season.
That's a season, absolutely. Okay, so the biggest problem I see, if I could just jump ahead a little bit, is people don't give enough thought to the kind of person that they want and need to have in their life. And the analogy I've used for years is people give more thought to going out and buying a new car than they do to the kind of person they would like to be with.
Yes.
And I've said to you before, as we've talked, I said, when you go to buy a new vehicle, if you want a little energy efficient car, you don't start off looking at trucks.
Yes.
You set up some criteria for yourself, whether you write them down or just in your mind, and that guides the search in terms of making the choice of what you're finally going to buy.
Yes.
But what I see people doing and have over the years is they don't really give any thought to what are the qualities of the person that I would like to be with. What does this person need to have, whether they're male or female? How do we fit together in terms of our beliefs and our views of the world and how we want to be in this relationship? There's the old idea, people, when they're getting into a relationship, they never talk about things like finances. Very important topic in any relationship, as we both know. They never talk about sexuality. What do they expect in terms of their intimate relationship? They don't talk about core belief values. We used to call it religion, but it really is broader than that. And how do you view the world? And what kind of partner do you need who's going to support you in those views and grow with you so that you can grow together in developing a very strong, healthy relationships? And I think it's unfortunate, and we can talk a little bit later if you like about what I used to suggest to people about how to overcome some of that. And to be honest with you, the people that did that, and when I was seeing them in my practice, usually did quite well. They made some really good choices and they found some really good people to be involved with.
Well, and in fact, I have been utilizing some of those, and I can second that opinion that I find it really helpful. One of the metaphors I've always thought of is similar to car. We have this cars seem to be a great metaphor for this, but is when I've gone out and gone to purchase my car or looked for a car that I'm interested in, I'm also more inclined to see that car out on the street once I have primed myself to looking for that very car. So the interesting thing is when we lay out what we want, it almost primes us to be in a better position to notice that and see it out there. It's kind of a way that the brain perceives what we're looking for, right? And
as you know, there's been a lot written about what we call the law of attraction.
yes,
That if we really focus very clearly on what it is that we want, we tend to attract that very thing into our life. And so if I can just for a moment talk about the 3 lists that I used to get my clients to do. They were 3 lists, and the first list was, what are the qualities that are absolutely essential for this person to have in order for me to be interested in that person? And there usually weren't that many, 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 or so. But I used to caution people, don't make the list too long because you'll end up screening out everybody and there'll be nobody left. So you want to really look at your own core values and really understand what's important. For example, when I was looking for a partner, one of my criteria was always absolutely no smoking. You can be the most wonderful person in the world, the most intelligent, the most witty, the most beautiful, etc. But if you smoke,
That
it's
was
a
it.
no-go.
But you
That was an automatic.
you have, so these, when we're drawing that line, and this is something I think is really important, is that that line is actually really drawn. And I think I've talked with people sometimes who say, "Oh, I definitely don't want to be with someone who drinks," but they're not always following through. And so you need to really sit with that and be really honest with yourself when you're writing those lists to examine whether you're going to actually follow through on that. That's an important part of it, right?
And that's why that first list I used the term absolutely essential.
Yeah.
I'm not going to waver from this. And these lists, by the way, it's not something you sit down and in 5 minutes you scribble them out. I used to tell people, sit down, do the 3 lists, and I'll talk about the other 2 in a moment, and then come back to them a week later and see if there's any revisions. Come back to them 2 weeks later, see if there's revisions. Come back to them a month, because at the end, you want to have things on your list that really do reflect what's important to you. And the second list were things that were important, but not critical. So I want someone who tells the truth, for example. Yeah, we all give little white lies once in a while, but basically someone who's honest, someone who's dependable. I can depend that they're going to be there for me. And qualities like that really contribute to a strong relationship, a healthy relationship. And the final list was things that would be nice, but they're really not that important. So maybe you have a preference for a blonde man, for example, but you meet somebody who's got all the other qualities that you're really looking for, but they're brunette or maybe even bald.
Yeah,
And so
for sure.
that outweighs all of these minor things that, yeah, it's nice, that you might be initially attracted, but then you go through your list in your mind and you weed out. And as I say, if you go to a party and you have this list in your mind of what you've come up with, you can very quickly determine who are the people you might be interested in getting to know and who are the people you really don't want to get to know. And it makes it very easy.
In my experience, because I've been probably doing vision and listings since I was really young, and in my experience, that when we've done that process enough times internally with ourselves, we also get to have a really more automatic reflect those, because we've been primed with it. Sometimes I automatically notice that quality that I absolutely don't want to be with without even thinking about it, because I've spent enough time internally processing that. And so it really is an important exercise, I think, actually maybe not if critical for me, that we do something like that. And the one thing I've noticed when people start trying to identify the things that are important to them, they tend to go for generic concepts.
Nice.
Good looking,
Kind.
nice, kind, fun to be with. And they seem to miss those foundational substance issues that actually improve our survival. One of the things you and I have talked about is finances are one of the number one reasons that couples break up. Number one. And when people think of money, when they're looking at a partner, they might think someone with money or a steady job, but they might not be thinking about how are you managing money. It's not really about how much you make. You can still destroy your life, right?
Absolutely.
Even if you're making a good income. How do you cope in life? How do you cope with stress? Are there destructive tendencies? And when we're so vague and we make these generic terms, it's amazing how we overlook that, right?
Well, there's very few times in our life that we're required to be specific.
Yeah.
We tend to live our life with these generic concepts, these vague concepts that everybody uses, and nobody really knows what they mean. And, if you say to me, I'd like to be with someone who's kind, I have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
I have a concept in my mind of what it means to me to be with someone who's kind.
Completely.
But that may be as black and white
Yeah.
when compared to what you need.
Yeah.
And so that's why these lists are so important, that you be very, very specific as possible. And that's why it's important to take time to really understand. Because what you're really doing, and as you can appreciate, is you're really learning a lot more about yourself. You're
Absolutely.
really being clear about yourself. Yes, it has to do with who you'd like to be with, a new partner, but it's really about you.
It is really about you. Absolutely. What happens, I don't know if you've run into this, but issues around self-esteem. People writing, getting clear on what they want, and then asking themselves whether they're worthy of it.
That's a huge factor. It really is. And unfortunately, too many people get to that point and they decide, well, I'm probably not good enough for this kind of person, this ideal person that I've set out for myself. That's one option that they can decide to do. Another option is, okay, maybe I need to take a look at those areas in myself that I need to improve. Maybe that means going into therapy for a period of time,
Yeah.
and really learning more about myself and developing those characteristics that allow me then to accept someone who has the characteristics that I've identified into my life. Just because you don't have them now, as you know, as a psychologist, it's the whole idea of learning more about yourself is it allows you to grow and to change. These people that can say, I can never change. Well, they've just negated your career and my career, because that's what our careers are all about.
That's what we're about. Absolutely. Yeah.
And as you know, the only people who can't change are those people who refuse to accept the fact that they can.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Your result is guaranteed if you do nothing.
Absolutely.
So best to do something different. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Dylan, on what we're talking about.
That's been a big theme since I've met you. That's really sunk in with me is that, if you want something to change in your life, you have to do something different to make a change. That's been very helpful. It's really a crazy time to be talking about relationships, exploring relationships, because so much of it has changed.
Yeah.
It's really interesting hearing it from your perspective. So one of the things that I'm finding very interesting is the dynamic in trying to meet a partner during the COVID era. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, let's for a moment talk about the concept of romantic love.
Yes.
Because that's such an overwhelming component.
But Larry, it's in all the movies and the news, and
absolutely.
It's
we're going to walk into the room and we're going to be gobsmacked when we meet this wonderful person, and that's going to be it, and we're going to be happy for the rest of our life. Well, we all know that that's absolute nonsense.
Yes.
That's not reality at all. But, and we can talk about this for a little bit, Paola, the idea of romantic love is valid in certain ways.
Yes.
When we do meet someone who, for want of a better term, excites us or really attracts us, there's all kinds of changes that take place.
Yes.
Physiologically and biologically and emotionally. And unfortunately, if we don't have a good idea of the kind of person we want to be with, those will overtake us and they will result in us making usually some very bad decisions.
Absolutely.
Or risky decisions. And I know you and I have talked, you might want to talk a little bit more about, because you've done more reading in that area than I have, about the kind of biological changes that take place in the body.
Huge. Yeah.
And how long they really last in reality.
Yes. Part of this is through the work of Bruce Lipton, who's published a book and done some work on understanding relation. He's a cell biologist, and he published a book called The Honeymoon Effect. And what I found really interesting about that conversation is when we experience falling in love, or we experience that physical excitement, those endorphins, those whatever we want to call it, we are, as you mentioned, gobsmacked, and you walk into a room and see somebody and you say, that's the man I'm going to marry, or that's the woman that's going to be for me forever. In the process of getting to know and experiencing all these physiological changes, it actually affects the way we we are and how we present ourselves in relationship, because the very introduction of these hormonal changes influence us to really be our best selves in those moments that we are in love. That cascade of hormones optimizes. Think of the times when you look back in your history and you were your best self, when you were feeling great. You were behaving in a way that you would have loved to behave. When we are in that state of in love, it is easier to access that place again. And that's why it's so hard to make judgments in that moment, because we literally filter out any red flags, because the hormonal, the meeting of that person, we tend to be our best selves. And as the hormones and settles, as all that falling in love process calms down, our natural habitual state starts to show up. And I think, I don't know whether he was suggesting 8 months. It could be a year, for however long that period lasts. We really need to take time in to really see who the real relationship is. I had a psychologist friend she would always say, after a period of time, let's say they've been together for a year and suddenly the person starts acting out, and she says, "Oh, okay, now the real relationship is showing up." So the real relationship we don't know necessarily right when we first meet somebody, and it's a process of taking time.
Always.
Yeah.
And that's why in a healthy relationship, the communication is so important, because it's going to happen to both parties. They're both going to revert back to who they really are. They've been putting their best foot forward, as we say, or their perfect self forward, or they're presenting themselves as they would like themselves to be, but it's really not realistic. And you talked about red flags, and I would contend that the red flags are always there
Yeah.
if we're looking for them. But
Yeah,
the reality
I
is, in
agree.
the first few months, we don't look for them, or we
Agree.
ignore them. So you may go to a party and your partner you're with has one too many drinks, and you look at them and say, "Oh, I thought you told me you didn't drink." "Well, that was just that once. I'm sorry, I got carried away." Or you're driving down the road and the person who's driving gets cut off, and they react quite strongly. "I'm going to show him, I'm going to cut him off or her off," or whatever. And you say, well, wait a minute, it wasn't that serious. Well, it was to me, and it shows disrespect and
Yeah.
all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Those are red flags. Those are
I know.
possible drinking red flags, possible anger red flags.
Absolutely.
Irritability can be a problem with anger management.
Yeah.
So it's all these things that are there, but we tend to just overlook them and say, well, that's just once. We've been together for 2 months. That hasn't happened before, so I'm just going to ignore that.
Yeah.
But later on, we start to see it come out more and more strongly, and it creates a problem.
Well, which speaks to the idea that we need to observe what someone is doing more than what someone is actually saying. And I think sometimes we get seduced by the words, where for me, actions always reveal themselves more than how someone might describe themselves. I've certainly known of people that have talked even about, "I'm in a transitional state. I've always been like this in the past, but now I'm changing." Well, we need to sort of observe what they're actually doing more than what they're saying. And one of the traps we fall into, because we might want a relationship that much, is we want to believe what they say. We want to believe it, right?
And that get back to our own personal need at that particular point in our life.
Yeah.
You've probably heard this, which I heard many times in my practice. Well, I didn't have a relationship, but all my friends did, and so I felt kind of left out, and I really wanted to get in a relationship so I could fit in.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same idea of, well, all my friends are having babies, so I thought I better have a baby. It's ridiculous reason
absolutely.
for doing that.
Yeah.
But you're right. We tend to put our needs ahead of our better judgment.
Yeah.
And I go back again to saying, if you don't have a clear understanding of what it is that you want, that's going to happen over and over again.
Yeah.
If I can just give you one example, which I found fascinating. As you mentioned, I've been doing, or I did, custody and access for many, many years. And for the listeners who don't know what that is, it's when parents break up and they get into a big, terrible fight about who's going to have the kids and how much time and all the rest of it. And so part of what I would do when I was assessing those situations is I would do personality testing of the biological father, the biological mother, and often the new partners of each of them. And many times I would have somebody come back in my office and said, I think you got these results mixed up. I think what you've done is you mixed up my new partner with my ex, because my new partner is not at all like my ex. And I would pull out the psychological testing and I would look at and show them and say, look, with very minor variations, you're with someone exactly like you just left.
Yeah.
This person has the same personality as your ex. And they would just be astonished.
Yeah.
Because the tests weren't lying.
Yeah.
They were showing the person that they were really with.
We actually do tend to draw the same person into our lives on a repeated basis.
If we don't make changes ourselves.
If we don't make changes. If we don't learn the lesson, you will continue to be taught.
Exactly. And we see that happening so often, particularly with multiple marriages and multiple divorces.
Absolutely. I wanted to get back to Dylan's question as well, is how do people manage in the dating world now that we're dealing with COVID? Do you have any thoughts about how we navigate COVID and dating now that we have worries about our survival?
Well, I would argue that we use the same techniques that were successful for us before. And let me explain what I mean by that. We all know about the different dating sites, Love a Life, Match, etc., that are on the internet.
Yes.
And more people, because we can't go out and be involved in the activities that we used to be involved with, are turning to those sites to try and find someone or meet someone who they think might be someone they want to be with.
Right.
But think for a moment about how best to use those sites. If you just use the site to find someone who is attractive, witty, fun, someone you enjoy talking to, then you're not doing anything different than really you were doing 10 years ago before
Absolutely.
COVID, when you were just attracted to the superficial characteristics or some of the characteristics of the person. Yeah. But people who use those sites to meet someone and then engage in a conversation over a fairly long period of time, I'm talking about maybe several months before you even agree to meet with that person. So you get to know the person, you get to talk to the person, you get to bring up topics. How do you feel about this? What's important to you in terms of this?
Take the time. Take the time.
Get to know
Absolutely.
the person, so that when you finally do meet them, you have a good idea of this person that you're meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, meeting is a lot more interesting, a lot more enjoyable, but we have to work with what we have.
Mm-hmm. And when you do finally decide to meet, we can, and I have heard of people having social distancing dates. They go walk their dogs or they meet at a park and just walk outside just to get a sense of whether they connect. But like you said, I think, one of the things I found amazing is I've actually known people who have still managed to find a partner or find someone of interest, even during COVID. And much like you said, they put themselves out there, took their time, and in some cases even through activities that you enjoy. One point I want to bring up that I think is something I see a lot that shows up, and I'm curious about this, is the limiting beliefs. Things I hear a lot of people say and the impact it has on their experience of dating and being single. And I'll tell you some of the phrases that I tend to hear, and you may have heard some of them too. There's no good men out there. There's no good women out there. I'm too old. I'm too fat. It's tied to self-esteem. But even on a generic level, people think they're talking about facts when I'm not sure that they are facts when they say there's no men out there or all the good men are taken. And all the good men are taken. Someone might still have a sense of self-worth, but a belief like that is inherently limiting. And I wonder if you can comment on that, what your thoughts are.
Well, those beliefs come from so many different places. It's hard to really be specific. The kind of family you grow up in, the kind of parents you had, and the kind of relationship that your parents had, all have a huge impact on our beliefs about relationships. If your parents, for example, were involved in an abusive relationship, you may grow up to believe that all men are abusive, and I really have to be careful.
Yeah.
And that's going to really influence the kind of men that you allow yourself to look at. So if a man is assertive, appropriately assertive, and really has a clear idea of what they want to achieve in life, you may perceive that as being aggressive and scary and run like heck.
Yeah.
And instead choose someone who's very shy and backward and not capable of meeting your needs. We look at what our friends do, and we look at their beliefs. And the influence of peer pressure in dating, as you know, is massive. You know, we've all heard stories about the high school sweetheart that every girl or every guy was after, and the kind of how that influences the kind of person we tend to look for in the future. The impact of our friends' relationships can have a huge impact as well. We watch what happens with their relationships. Were they successful? Were they not? If they were successful, what can we take away from that? What can we learn? And so all of these things come into play in terms of trying to understand and believe that that's what we deserve. And we talked earlier about the effect of self-esteem, and I think that's huge.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of other cultural things, as we've talked about.
Well, and then all of these beliefs get, let's say, put out there and conversed and talked about, and we all influence each other with these beliefs. And so sometimes I've literally think I've seen groups of people in a joint mutual state of hopeless depression based on common beliefs they're sharing about men or women, and you know, the same idea, you know, when I've heard a lot of people saying statements like "there's no men out there," "there's no women out there," is the fact that we have a confirmation bias generally, and if I am planting those thoughts in my mind, my behavior is going to change depending on my belief. If I believe there's no good men out there, then I may just not go out and date, or I may be focusing. One thing I do is have people start to see something opposite from what they tend to say they see. So if they say all men are abusive, I will take time. I'll say, well, let's start to see, and it'll be deliberate about seeing men that are not, because the opposite exists. So there's a bit of a confirmation bias, and especially if we're in a particular circle of people, and we assume that that circle of people represents all people, and we tend to overgeneralize.
Well, that gets back to the idea, too, that our beliefs shape our perception of the world.
Absolutely, they do.
Know?
Yeah.
And that then leads to what I call the law of attraction. We tend to pull into our life only those things that are consistent with our beliefs.
Yeah.
So you're right. We don't change our beliefs.
Yeah.
We're not going to see what's out there. And I've had, in my practice, I'm sure you have too, men say, well, there's no good women out there. I mean, Nanaimo's too small, or there's
Completely.
no good men out there. You know, where can I go to meet a good man in Nanaimo? They're all taken, sort of idea.
Yeah.
And that's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, it's absolute nonsense.
Well, the
People
question
find
is-
each other in little villages of several hundred people, and they find someone and are very happy.
Yeah.
Because they're willing to look and see the characteristics, and they have a good idea of the kind of person they want to be with.
Well, and you know, and often it's amazing how we make these kind of judgments, global judgments, when, you know, if we're really going to be the scientists of the world, we can know that, you know, there's 100,000 people in Nanaimo, and, you know, for example, and, you know, there's probably a number of people that we have never met, that are absolutely starving and wanting a relationship. But I think we need to change that dialogue as well. We need to change and catch yourself when you're saying things like, there's none of this. Be deliberate about seeking something perhaps opposite from what we assume, right? Yeah.
And that gets back to if we know the kind of person we would like to be with, then it opens
Yes.
the doors for us to find that kind of person. And I've heard the opposites, as sure you have as well. If someone's from Vancouver, for example, they say, well, I can't find anybody in Vancouver. It's too huge. Where do I even start looking?
Yeah.
So they give up and they don't bother even looking.
Yeah. What do you suggest for people to do in working on changing their beliefs around, because I know it's when, especially if it gets entrenched with a depression, those beliefs get really rigid and people get stuck in them, and then they feel like they act like they're in a desert. And what do you suggest in changing some of those beliefs? How do we do that?
I think the first thing that you need to do to change your beliefs is to get a really clear idea about what your beliefs are.
Right.
And one of the things that I don't think people do enough is sit down with a pad of paper and a pencil and write down what their beliefs are.
Mm-hmm.
And I say write down rather than go to your computer.
Yes.
Because research has shown when you're writing, you're far more involved in the task of writing down what you're doing, what you believe, than going to the computer and tapping on a few keys.
Yeah.
It has a totally different effect. It may seem strange, but it does.
Well, amazing, right?
And once we have a clear idea about what our beliefs are, then we can start looking at those beliefs and either by ourselves through trying to understand ourselves better, or with the help of a therapist, or maybe
Yeah.
the help of some close friends,
Yeah.
or even family members, really take a look and see, are these beliefs true? Am
Yeah.
I really fat?
Yeah.
Compared to the general population, and you might discover, well, yeah, you're 10 or 12 pounds overweight. That's hardly fat.
Yeah.
Look, just go to the mall and sit there and watch people walk by. You'll see
Yeah.
people who are really fat. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying for yourself, take a real look honestly at yourself and see what it is that you really believe. Because then you can start to make some different choices. Yeah. And again, it comes back to choices. And I've taught people for years and years and years that everything we do is a choice. Whether we understand that or believe that or not, it is.
Yeah. And don't believe everything you believe.
No, absolutely not. That's what we're just talking about.
Absolutely.
Challenge yourself.
Well, it's funny. One story I have is my aunt who was in her 60s in Italy, and she was with someone that was with whom she felt quite lonely in this relationship. He lived in another city for years. They'd been together 12 years, but it was an emotionally distant relationship, physically distant, but they enjoy doing the odd thing together. One of the reasons she stayed is because she had the belief, I'm too old. I'm too old. I'm too old for a relationship. So when I went to Italy and I met with her, she was quite in a negative place in this belief and led to her depression. And so we talked about it. And we talked about it. One of my perspectives is we can be lonelier in a relationship sometimes that's unhealthy than we can on our own. She did. She was in her 60s, late 60s, left him, announced it to me. And before I knew it, she connected with an agency that put people together based on criteria of what was important to them. And after maybe several dates, in her 70s, met this amazing man. And I've never heard her laugh. It's been years now. She's as happy as can be. And I think we need to hold on to stories that are that give us hope, rather than stories that the stories that give us hopelessness, right? That they make a difference. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. Just going back to a point you made about your aunt there, I think it's important for people also to recognize the difference between being alone versus being lonely.
Yes,
You can be alone and be very, very happy, very
absolutely.
fulfilled, and have a very active and challenging and interesting life,
Yeah.
even though you're so-called alone. But you can also have many, many people in your life, as you say, and be in a
And be
relationship
very
and all the
lonely.
rest of it, and be
Absolutely.
incredibly lonely
Yeah.
because your
Yeah.
needs are not being met.
Absolutely. So it's very important to, regardless, to it's not really about just having a presence of a body with us, but to have a connection,
Absolutely.
and to create that connection. Dylan, do you have any other questions, or do you want to add something?
Yeah, I kind of thought of a sort of dilemma, like a hypothetical dilemma.
Okay.
And it's based on one of the limiting beliefs, or maybe it's not a limiting belief that I've encountered, which is someone's employment situation.
Hmm.
So what I'm curious about, like what your opinions are, is if there's an individual that feels inadequate, that they can't meet someone because of their social standing, based on their job, for example, should they focus on improving their career, their job? Should they focus on trying to deal with that loneliness and find someone? Is there some sort of balance in the middle? I'm kind of curious what your opinions are
That's
on
a
that type of situation.
good question, Dylan. Thank you.
Well, the simple answer to Dylan's question is all of the above. And that goes back again to really understanding where these limiting beliefs are coming from and making decisions about how can I improve myself? How can I improve my job? How can I improve my perceptions of the kind of person I would like to be with? And the more we can make those kinds of changes, the better the possibility that we're going to find someone and our life is going to improve, or we'll find a better job and our life will improve, or we'll find different activities that lead us to become involved with different kinds of people that we enjoy more. So it's not just a single answer. I think it goes back again to really understanding ourselves and really being clear and, most importantly, being honest. Because
Right.
a lot of times these limiting beliefs are very comforting.
Yeah.
They keep us safe, so to speak,
Yeah.
safe
Absolutely.
emotionally, because we don't have to take risks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go out and try and meet someone because there's nobody out there. Well, what that really means is I'm not going to go out there and take a risk because I might get hurt.
Yeah.
And I've been hurt a couple of times already.
Yeah.
I don't like that feeling. So I'm going to do everything I can to avoid that. And I'm not going to try for that new job that's coming up, even though I'm pretty well qualified for it. And anybody looking at my qualification would say, yeah, you have a good shot at it, but they may not like me.
Right.
And with my self-esteem the way it is, I'm not even going to try for it because I don't want to get rejected.
Yeah.
Limiting beliefs are horrible things and have major impacts on our
They
life.
have major impacts. And, I think in response also to what Dylan is saying is, I actually believe that as we start to do things, it really comes back down to our self-esteem, because if you're in a job situation and it impacts your sense of self-worth, we're right back to self-esteem and whether you feel worthy of someone. And I think the value in doing things for yourself that promote you to a place where you want to be is that it builds your confidence and self-esteem and sense of worth. So again, I think you're doing it for yourself.
Absolutely.
And then as you're doing it for yourself, it can enhance that. But, with the caveat that I have met people who have met each other under the most unusual circumstances, whether they're employed or disabled or, and in fact, a really good partner that's a good fit for where you're at in your life at that particular time. So I think, one thing I would caution is starting with a complete limiting belief that says I'm not worthy of anyone because I'm struggling with my employment. That for me would be another limiting belief. But do what you can to be the person that you're proud of, because that's what we emit. That's what we put out is I am proud of myself or I'm not. And so it really is about your relationship with yourself and putting your best foot forward in being the person that you want to be. And I think that puts us in a position to feel to make it easier to feel that we can actually draw someone into our lives that we would hope for, right?
What that brings up for me, and this goes back to something I did many, many years ago, which I don't think even you know about, Paula. I wrote a newspaper column for several years. And the column that got one of the biggest responses was a column I did about the fear that Canadians have about taking risks
Yeah.
and not being successful or being wrong. And in the column, I compared Canadians to Americans. And I made the point that for a lot of ambitious Americans, if you haven't failed at least once, you're just not trying.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've really been struck with. Canadians are raised to believe you shouldn't take risks. Don't make a mistake. As children, we're taught, oh no, don't do that. That's a mistake.
And never fail. Like, don't fail. Don't.
Yeah, don't ever fail. I mean,
Yeah.
how do we learn? We learn by
Absolutely.
trying things, taking risks. Some work out, a lot don't work out. But if we can learn from each one of them,
Yeah.
we're miles ahead.
Well, if you must have heard this statement, paraphrasing, of course, but is that people who have experienced more success in their lives are also more likely to have had failures. And the red flag for me would be that you've never failed at all. And, because we cannot venture in life without getting hurt or bruised but we build ourselves up so that we can prepare ourselves to put ourselves out there again. So in a way, we embrace failure. We embrace the fact that it's not a reflection on us. It's a reflection of our courage, maybe.
Absolutely. It's a positive thing.
It's a positive thing.
Reminds me of someone who was in my employee many, many years ago. And this person and their partner had, the way they described their life was no kids, no pets, no plants. No responsibilities whatsoever except to each other.
Wow.
And that's all they had, was the two of them in their life. And they were happy with that, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it was so incredibly limiting for them. But they couldn't see that because they felt safe.
Yeah.
And the other example it reminds me of is the most successful inventor in the history of the world was Thomas Edison. And, the story about him inventing the light bulb and being asked, why do you persist in this? We have kerosene lamps. They give us wonderful light. And you keep doing these things, then it doesn't work out. And Edison's response was something to the effect of, I know, but now I know 5,000 ways this doesn't work.
I know. It's
and he persisted and he was successful.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be learned from those kinds of what you referred to a few minutes ago as inspirational stories.
Yeah.
Don't give up. If it's something that you know is important to you and it's not criminal and it doesn't have a negative effect on other people, don't give up. Keep on going.
Don't let your past predict your future.
Absolutely.
Do not let your past predict your future. And I think the past is done, and we always have a new way to start today. And I think that's a really important piece to this, right? Is being able to have the resilience to face a risk and trust that there's something we can learn from each failure, and then perhaps open up the doors to getting what we want. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so many people have talked about success comes one step after you give up.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Robbins talks a lot about that in his tapes and things like that and CDs, and lots of other people have talked about that as well, that you get to a certain point and you think, well, there's really no use in continuing because this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And if you just take another 1 or 2 or 3 steps, all of a sudden success is there.
Yeah. So, Dylan, thoughts?
It's really affirming to see two doctors that have had a career tell me that it's okay to fail and it's actually good to do that it's part of the process, because when you're going through those failures, it often doesn't like feel that way. You know, it feels like it's really hard and like it's time to give up. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And then we start to define ourselves by the failure. I'm a failure. Maybe, it becomes our identity. And I'm like, we actually are not failures. We fail at something does not make one a failure. I think of failing at something as a kind of like a mistake. I'm not defined by my mistakes. It's a sign that I'm keep trying. I keep having a joke, and I think I might have told you this one, that I want written on my epitaph, "She died trying."
Absolutely. But this gets back again to the topic that we started out with, and we've sort of gone around it in many different ways, but relationships. And what I'm referring to is choose your friends carefully.
Yeah.
Choose people that you admire. Choose people who have the qualities that maybe you have some of them, maybe you would like to have more of them. Choose people who are risk takers, not in a stupid way, but in
Yes.
a really logical, rational, makes sense kind of way.
Yes.
People who understand how important it is not to live your life totally safe all the time,
Yes.
but rather to have some risk in your life, take chances, try for that new job, give that relationship a chance that looks like it may work out for you.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, they're there to support you.
Yeah.
And that's really the true friends that you have. They're not the ones who say, "I told you so." They're the ones who say, "Hey,
Absolutely.
good for you, good for you for getting in there and trying."
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great.
That can't even be overstated, to be honest. I think that's probably a critical life, getting through life element that we need to have, is those kinds of relationships that empower us. I think sometimes we choose friendships because they're comfortable and we feel it's in alignment with that. They're not, I guess, let me give you an example. There was an individual I had met once who was very reticent to hang out with people that he thought were above him. His concern, I think it had to do partly with his self-esteem, because for him it highlighted where they're not, and so he stayed in the comfort zone with people who are probably equally dysfunctional and I
Or
think
limiting.
or limiting, and being able to similar, really. Do you not think, to finding an intimate partner, that we could also apply that to choosing the kind of friendships that would be good for us, that we want?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I used to say all the time in my practice, I want to have the smartest people I can possibly find in my practice because they all make me look good.
Well, there you go. And here I come. No.
There you are. There you are. It's interesting. I had a friend, an older friend, who was very successful in business, multimillionaire. And I remember him telling me, we got talking about friendships one day. And I remember him telling me, take a look at your 10 closest friends. And he was just talking about finances, so I'll stay with that example. But he said, if you look at your 10 closest friends and sort of take the average of what they make, that's what you're going to make.
Wow.
You will be influenced by your friends to make what they make and not go beyond that. He said, if you choose people, he said, and I made these choices in my life. I chose people who were much wealthier than me, and I tried to get to know them and hang out with them and be friends with them because I wanted to be a wealthy person. I didn't want to be poor when I retired. Yeah. And he said it certainly had a huge influence in terms of helping me learn how to look at finances and money and how it affects your life.
Absolutely.
And I think the same principle applies to our relationships, whether they're friendships or intimate or whatever they are. We can't choose our family, but we can choose everybody else in our life.
Yeah. Well, an example would be if you are looking to improve your athleticism and you want to, as you start to spend time with healthy people that are oriented towards an athletic activity and that mindset of discipline. Right now I have a great person that I'm working out with 5 days a week, and we're on the same page and we support each other and we inspire each other. So when we are drawn and put ourselves in their vicinity, we're more likely to be influenced by them and collect some of the qualities that would allow us to move forward in our lives as well. And, a lot of people I find are happy to share. When you've accomplished a certain something in your life that's important to you, we enjoy sharing, at least from my perception. I don't know, for you, you've been wonderful at sharing from what I can see.
Well, I'm a golfer, and I've certainly seen this over the years. When I'm golfing with people who are not that I'm spectacular, but not as good as me,
Yeah.
I don't play as well because
Yeah.
I'm not trying as hard.
Yeah.
When I like to play with people who are better than me by a number of strokes, 5, 10 strokes, because then somehow I concentrate more,
Yeah.
I focus more, each shot is more important.
Yeah.
And what I find is those people are much more complimentary. If I hit a good shot, way to go, Larry, that was a great shot.
Absolutely.
And so you get encouragement and you
Yeah.
get validation and all the good things that help us to improve. And so I
It's so
absolutely
right.
agree.
Yeah, because I was doing the running clinic, and one of the our instructor and trainer would tell us is that when we're running an event, a marathon, half marathon, that you want to train with someone who's just one step ahead of you, just one step
Absolutely.
ahead of you, because you push yourself. And so we don't need to be intimidated. It's not a sign that we're less worthy because someone is more advanced than us. I think those are other limiting beliefs people need to let go of. We all are here to support and teach one another. And I personally have always respected and sought out people that I admired and respected and wanted to learn something from. And I found it's been a blessing for me. I think we've made some really awesome points today.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things I taught my 2 boys when I was raising them, there's no such thing as a negative experience as long as you learn something from it.
Exactly.
So whether it's successful or not, that's almost secondary.
Yeah.
If you can ask yourself at the end, what did I learn from this?
Yeah.
What could I do differently to be more successful next time I did this? Or how could I apply what I know now to the next thing that I get involved in?
Yeah.
And when you do that, life is just a constant series of successes.
Yeah.
There is no failures.
Absolutely. And the failures can propel you towards the success as well. And so, and I think if you're stuck and even if you're tuning into a show like this and I can sometimes work with people and trying to figure out their limiting beliefs because they're having a hard time identifying it. That's a time to go and reach out to a skilled clinician, someone who can help you navigate the questions of how do I do this precisely. Everyone's situation is a little different. Their beliefs are a little bit different. But I think these are great concepts to be able to adopt into your life. But always remember that if you struggle to adopt them, that's a time, I think, to reach out and get some support because we all need it sometimes. And it's all a sign that we want to move forward. Dylan, do you want to add something? I think we've matched our time goal for the hour, but do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, I think that was some awesome insights into the world of relationships. It definitely is making me look at things a little bit differently. It was awesome to have you on here, Larry.
Thank you.
It was
Enjoyable being here.
awesome to have you on. And we have a lot more topics we're going to talk about down the road, I hope.
As long as your listeners don't get bored.
Oh, no. Lots of interesting stuff. And I think the work that you've done, Larry, has been interesting, and especially with the custody and access. And I always admired you for doing that. I think that's not an easy job. I think it's such a big issue in our society in terms of how divorces run and parenting issues. So I certainly hope we can talk more about that sometime down the road.
I'd be willing to do that.
But I thank you so much. It's been awesome. I've loved talking to you, Larry. And I'm,
welcome.
I know you have lots of wisdom that people are going to absorb and soak in and change their lives with. Yeah.
Hopefully a little.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go for a little bit. That would be awesome. So thank you, Dylan, also for being here and always being a great support. And I want to thank the listeners and wishing you all the best in your efforts to connect with people and bring some more closeness and relationships into your lives during
take
this.
risks.
Take risks during this challenging time. I'm sure you can accomplish it, and especially tuning into shows like this. Hopefully, this is of help. So, all the best to you all. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day today. It was a pleasure, and until next time, take good care.